Classic Plus, a popular topic amongst the Classic WoW community, and one many of you might have heard about, but just in case you haven't, let's do a little bit of a recap on what the idea of Classic Plus is, just so we're all on the same page. Classic Plus presents an alternate future for Classic WoW, set in the vanilla WoW universe and presenting a different future than the one we got after entering the Dark Portal to Outland. What content could we have seen if we stayed on Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor and never discovered that portal? Classic Plus presents a way to keep vanilla the way it was while presenting the opportunity to add even more into the game while sticking to that original vanilla feeling and staying within the rule set of vanilla WoW. There are a couple of servers out there that have painted a picture of how Classic Plus would look like, or a futuristic version of vanilla WoW with even more additional gameplay, set in the vanilla WoW universe, and we also have some lore that suggests content that could have been put into vanilla WoW back in the day which was never actually put into the game, which could all be used in making the official Classic Plus version, if that ever becomes a thing. So, let me paint a picture of what I think Classic Plus could look like. Obviously, I'm not in charge of anything, and I'm not trying to say this is what the majority of people actually wants, as so far, Classic Plus is simply an idea of a futuristic Classic WoW where we go in a different path than into Outlands. So, let me know if there's anything I mention in this video that you agree with or strongly disagree with in the comment section down below, and let me know what your picture of Classic Plus looks like while you're at it. First off, let's talk about the content they could implement. First up, more dungeons. We already have several dungeons they could easily add into Classic WoW and the vanilla universe that makes a lot of sense, some of which have been implemented quite successfully on other alternate servers out there. First up, let's look at a possible high-end new dungeon intended for max level content, the Karazhan Crypts. We already have the zone itself, we already have the crypts, they are just completely empty and pretty much used for nothing, and there was obviously meant to be something there when they added it to the game. We got Karazhan in the Burning Crusade, but the fact that they already made the infrastructures and bothered to create the zone and the architecture for Karazhan before launching vanilla makes me think this was intended content for the actual vanilla game before they decided to lump it into an expansion. The Karazhan Crypts could offer very alternative gameplay, a very different dungeon than before, and dealing with undead and skeletons makes it feel like you are truly fighting endgame content. Building upon Karazhan, we could also get the actual Karazhan raid that we had in the Burning Crusade, but tuned down to level 60 instead, and making it Classic WoW content intended for level 60 players. Now we would have both an endgame dungeon centered around Karazhan, and an endgame raid centered around Karazhan. We also have the Zone of Hyjal, or Mount Hyjal, depending on what you want to call it, the zone in the middle of Winterspring, Fellwood, Ashara, and Ashenvale, which is a huge crater with no content in it during vanilla. This could easily be used and turned into actual content by adding quest hubs, cities, mobs, and maybe even dungeons and raids. We could for example have a dungeon that leads us into the battle for the Mount Hyjal raid, as well as having a modified version of the TBC Mount Hyjal raid, but tuned down to level 60 content. This would give us a whole endgame zone, a brand new dungeon, and a somewhat brand new raid, and the Mount Hyjal zone could even contain level 60 dailies, kind of like the Isle of Qualdanis from TBC. We also have another piece of interesting content for either an endgame raid or a endgame world boss, which is already pretty much put into vanilla WoW, but not 100% finished. Throughout your times leveling in vanilla WoW and doing dungeons, you would probably have picked up a quest from Uldaman, which took you around a lot of different locations and ended up with you looting a fragment in Tanaris, all the way down south, and that fragment is somewhat guarded by a lot of high level elite. This questline by itself was somewhat intended for somewhat high level players. I mean, you got it from the end boss in Uldaman and then it took you to Tanaris, and since there are elite titan looking mobs guarding this object, it signals some importance. especially due to it being locked behind a questline. It really reminds me of the Molten Core and Onyxia attunement questline, but done in earlier levels, which to me signals that this questline could have been intended as an attunement for either an Uldum raid or a Titan world boss located south in Tanares. And you see, where you lead this object there's a gate, and it would make sense if this gate was opened by completing this quest chain, and there was either a world boss inside, or the entrance to an actual raid. And we already have references to this in the vanilla WoW lore, stating that Uldum is an ancient hall of stone located in the southern part of the desert of Tanares. Uldum is a research facility for the Titans in their continuing efforts to enhance the biosphere of Azeroth. Specific information regarding their work as it relates to Uldum is unknown and can only be accessed with the Plate of Uldum. It also refers back to Norganon, which is in fact a Titan, the Titan of lore and celestial magics to be exact, which ties right back into the questline itself, which started in Uldman and kept us going back to the researcher's library in Ironforge. Maybe there was an actual raid intended for vanilla WoW, which involved the Titans but never made it to the actual game itself. I guess we'll never know, but it does give us a very cool option and blueprint for Classic WoW, or Classic Plus at least. So with dungeons covered, let's talk about some extra stuff that I would love to see added in a Classic Plus game, and feel free to disagree or agree and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Class balancing. The vanilla classes makes sense for vanilla, but in Classic Plus I want more diversity, and not just a raid filled with warriors and rogues. More endgame content outside of raiding. Maybe give us a daily quest hub, like I just mentioned. This could be in Mount Hyjal, or maybe even the unused zone in the northern part of Eastern Kingdoms. You know, the zone right north of the Plaguelands, just sitting there. More class quests. Imagine if paladins had a specific class quest or class quest chain in which they could cleanse the corrupted Ashbringer and forge the actual Ashbringer, which could have been a paladin only legendary weapon. This would be very cool and very unique and would make a lot of paladins very happy, and it also makes sense lore wise. Also, more questlines that are important to the story. For example, more questlines centered around Illidan before he became the bad guy, and more questlines centered around Arthas before he became the Lich King, and before the culling of Stratholm, and so on. And now I'm just gonna spitfire a couple more ideas fit to the current modernized MMO market. Feel free to agree or disagree with them, but here we go. A new profession, gardening. Using Unagora soil, water and seeds, you can plant your own garden and harvest different types of greens and fruits, which can be further used in cooking or simply sold on the auction house, providing an alternative style of gameplay for people who enjoy that part of the game. Basically, bringing farming into World of Warcraft. Going in line with gardening, we would also need new cooking recipes that use these materials to craft food and drinks, preferably with stat buffs so they can be used for raiding. Another profession that could be used in the same way is husbandry, where you would specialize on breeding and working with animals. You could milk cows and use that milk in cooking to create various recipes, and you could harvest meat from animals, and so on. Player housing. And a new profession heavily tied into player housing, woodcutting or lumberjacking, basically chopping down trees, aka a brand new gathering profession. Each player house would require a certain amount of lumber in order to be built, making sure there will be a demand for this profession. Also, another profession heavily tied into woodcutting or lumberjacking, and that is woodworking or carpentry, turning those lumbers into furniture and even storage units for your player house. And yeah, those are just some ideas for Classic Plus, and once again, let me know your ideas in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.